I'm really pleased to be here today. I was very appreciative of Patty inviting me. I will admit that prior to her invitation, I didn't know a lot about NAIA, and usually when you come to a group like this, you want to know your audience so that you know you're speaking to them. I just learned who all of you are, and there's such a wide variety of backgrounds here. I teach and talk and do a lot of training with a lot of species of animals, and I was given 2 hours today, and now that I look at the agenda, I realize that was very generous of Patty. That's a lot of time today, but it's barely enough time to scratch the surface. So today I'm going to really give you a broad overview about training, about some of my experiences, and what I'm going to start with today is I will talk a little bit about my personal philosophy regarding training, give you a little bit of my background so that you understand my perspective on the topic. I want to talk about new trends, evolutions that are taking place right now in the field of animal training. I want to give you some examples of practical tools that are in use today that are really important for a lot of trainers. And I want to talk about modern applications, new things that have been developed in the last several decades that are taking training to very new and very exciting levels. Now, I realize that not everybody here is a trainer, not everybody here may have an interest in training, but as you'll hear after I talk about it, I'm really kind of a training geek. I'm passionate about the subject. I feel it's critical for the well-being of our animals, whatever animals you work with and whatever capacity you use them in, training can be a very beneficial thing. I think it's kind of important that I start by giving you a little bit about my perspective and my personal biases. I think that when you're asked to speak to a group like this, you try very hard to be objective. You try very hard to take things from a very objective point of view. But the reality is, none of us can really talk about a subject without bringing our own biases to the table, without using our own experiences as a filter to what we talk about. So the best way for you to understand that filter is to understand a little bit about my background, because it'll give you a better sense of where I'm coming from. I grew up on a cattle ranch. I spent my entire life in a cattle ranch in southern New Mexico, and spent my life riding horses, herding cattle, and when my grandfather died, who ran the ranch, my uncle took over, and he decided to modernize the ranch. Well, he didn't really do a lot to modernize it. He still herded the cattle the old-fashioned way, but he decided he wanted to use dogs to help in herding the cattle. And my first exposure to training was really by seeing the way he worked with his dogs. That didn't inspire me to want to be a trainer, but it exposed me to that area since I was very, very young. When I was in high school, I volunteered with a guide dog organization and got my first experience around a more formal training situation. As a volunteer, I prepared dog food and cleaned kennels, and I don't think I ever touched an actual dog. I just saw them in the distance. But after doing that for a year, I actually had the opportunity to be a groom, and by the third year, I was an actual handler and worked with the professional trainers. And I was really convinced that when I went out and worked in the real world, that was what I was going to do. I was going to work with guide dogs. And I kind of geared myself as I went to college. I studied animal behavior, and I really was determined that that's what I was going to do. But as often is the case, life takes you in a lot of weird and unusual directions. And my training and my education is as a biologist and a behaviorist. And over the years, I've had the great fortune to work with quite a variety of different species of animals. I entered the zoological profession in 1976. I have been working and training professionally since that time. I'm coming up on my 35th year as a professional animal trainer. And in the zoological field, I have worked extensively with big cats. I've worked quite a lot with a variety of hoofstock, worked with a lot of different species of birds, and I've worked with a lot of marine mammals, as well as quite a variety of other species as well. In 1996, I was brought on the staff of Western Illinois University to teach a graduate course on animal training. I'm in my 15th year teaching that now. At that time, it's what helped me to publish my first book, Animal Training, Successful Animal Management Through Positive Reinforcement. And I continue to do that while still doing a lot of my other jobs. And then in 1997, I had the good fortune to, by the way, throughout my career, despite the fact that I started as a volunteer with dogs, it wasn't until 1997 that I came full circle and started working with dogs again. I got brought in to work with several search and rescue dog organizations and have worked with search and rescue dogs for the last 13, 14 years. I also, since that time, have had the good fortune to be able to work with several law enforcement departments. I work with several service dog and guide dog organizations, and have had real good fortune to sort of bring my training full circle. I still consider myself, most of you in this room, I hear dog training. I still consider myself to be a novice at dog training, because the reality is I've only really been doing that professionally for the last 13 or 14 years, and it's only a small part of my overall experience. But because I have worked with lots of different species of animals, when I talk about training, I don't focus on dolphins or dogs or elephants or bears or big cats or horses. I really like to talk about it in the broader context, because I believe that when we start talking about training, the science is the same. Certainly the practical applications will vary depending on the species. So let me tell you what I think of training. What do I mean by training? I have a simple one-word definition that I like to use when I tell people what training is. To me, training is teaching. We are teaching animals how to live in our environment. Whether it's a dog in your apartment in downtown Chicago, or a lion in the zoo, or a dolphin in the aquarium, the animals need to learn the rules for living in our world. Now, if one of my psychology professors from college were sitting in the room right now, they would shudder and go, "Ken, that's a terrible definition of training." And it's not a scientific definition. But when I work with trainers, the perspective that I want them to understand is that I think of teaching as being a shared process in which the animals participate in that process with you. They have choices to participate or not participate. And to me, teaching conveys to the trainers that I work with this broader concept that is important to me. I also want you to understand my philosophy when it comes to training. I believe that for there to be a successful animal care program with any kind of animal, you need to have a foundation. And that foundation consists of 4 cornerstones. Those 4 cornerstones to me are: 1, a healthcare program, some type of a veterinary program. Even the very worst pet owners I know recognize the need to take their pets to the veterinarian once in a while. But a professional animal care program must have a healthcare component with a veterinarian's input, hopefully a veterinarian on staff, to really round out the healthcare program for that animal. Additionally, the second cornerstone is a nutrition component. All animals need to eat. They need food, they need vitamin supplementation. You need to understand what the proper diet is for the animal you're working with. These first 2 cornerstones, very few people would ever argue with me about. As I get to the 3rd and 4th one, there tends to be some people that might disagree. I think an environmental component is important to a good professional animal care program. Having the right environment for the animal. If it's an animal that likes to climb trees, then make sure it has something to climb. If it's an animal that likes to dig, it needs dirt to dig in. If it's an animal that likes to swim, it needs water to swim in. But the environment is much more than just the furniture in their enclosure or in their habitat. It also includes their social structure, other animals or other things to interact with. And finally, the 4th component, to me, of a good animal care program is a behavior management component, a training and enrichment component. I'm always surprised by people who take care of animals. You can tell they're passionate about it, but they don't give a thought to behavior management and training. 3 million dogs or more put to sleep every year in the United States. Why? Primarily because so many owners take dogs in without recognizing that training would have made the lives of that dog better, would have made their lives and their homes easier. I believe everybody needs to recognize that training is not a luxury. It's not something that you do if you have time. It's something that's a critical component to good animal care. So from my perspective, and this may be unique for some people, but from my perspective, all of these things are important. And they're not listed in any particular order. I think you can take any one of them away and have a decent animal care program. But I don't believe it can truly be a professional animal care program unless you have all 4. So when I start thinking about training, I like to divide the reasons we train our animals into 2 groups, and what I would call primary reasons for training and secondary reasons for training. My definition for a primary reason for training is something that directly benefits the individual animal being trained. Not humankind, not the species, not our knowledge, but that animal. To me, that's why I have my job. My job is to be able to provide the best care possible to the animals that I'm responsible for. And so I want to make sure that the staff that I work with recognize that there are three primary reasons for training. One is physical exercise. Whether, again, I don't have a problem in downtown Chicago where I live that there are pet owners that have dogs in small apartments. But I do care if they never exercise that dog and never get that dog out for required exercise. When we build a zoological environment, when we build our aquarium, we have dolphins and whales at the aquarium that I work at. There is no substitute for the Pacific Ocean except the Pacific Ocean. There's no substitute for Brazilian rainforest except the rainforest. But when you bring an animal into an artificial environment, we're not necessarily trying to replicate the wild. But in the wild, animals search for food. They avoid predators. They look for mates. They look for proper temperature. In most controlled environments under human care, we provide all those things for the animals. So they don't have to exercise. They can get overweight. They can get bored. A training program keeps animals physically fit, keeps animals in a good aerobic condition, really helps them maintain good body condition. Same thing with mental stimulation, my second primary reason for training. Many of the animals that I work with are exotic species, and in the wild they are constantly being challenged. They're worried about the predator that's behind them. They're worried about where their next meal is coming from. They need to figure out where their mate is going to be. They have a lot of stressors in their lives. Stress is a normal part of a wild animal's everyday existence. Well, in most human care conditions, we try to reduce stress. But if we take away the predators, if we take away their need to hunt for food, and we take away their need to search for a mate, we take away all those things that occupy 75, 80, or 90% of their mind activity in the wild, it's easy for those animals to get bored. Training provides mental stimulation. I have to tell a story. When I wrote my book the first time, I was doing a lot of research to look at the history of training. And I want to tell a story about circuses in England in the 1970s. In the 1970s, the Royal Humane Society decided it was their mission to shut down the traveling circuses in England. The Royal Humane Society, I believe, is sort of like the English equivalent of the U.S. Humane Society. They were a fairly new activist group at the time. Now, as I start to tell my story, I need to let you know that I have no idea what the conditions of circuses were like in England in the 1970s. No clue. But here's what happened in this situation. Because they decided that they wanted to shut down the circuses, the first thing that the Humane Society looked at was the evil training that took place in the circus, because they felt it demeaned the animals. So they decided to contract animal behavior students at Cambridge University to do a scientific study comparing the animals in the circuses in England to the similar species animals in zoos in England. Because they were certain that this study would show that the circuses were bad places. Do you know what the study showed? The study showed that in every single case, the animals in the circuses were in far better shape and far better condition than most of the animals in every zoo they visited, precisely because they had a training program. The animals in the circuses were a good body weight. They had a good sparkle in their eye. Their coats were in good condition. They didn't exhibit stereotypic behavior. Because in that day and age, zoos thought training was an evil thing. They didn't participate in it. And because they didn't, Their animals were bored. Their animals were overweight. Their animals were not in good health. And so the study did not show what the Royal Humane Society had hoped it would show. Now, because the study didn't prove what they thought it would prove, the Royal Humane Society chose not to publish the study. Fortunately, you can't keep a good graduate student down. They put a lot of work into that study, so they published it elsewhere. But it's an important study because it shows you that that one component, that's what they were told to look at, was training. That was probably the best thing the circuses in that day and age could have done, because it gave their animals physical exercise and mental stimulation. Finally, for me, the third primary reason for training is cooperative behavior. If we can teach animals to participate in their own care, teaching, this is a false killer whale opening its mouth so that we can brush its teeth. Here's an elephant allowing us to look at its foot so that we can make sure that its pads are in good condition and that it's got good foot care. By being able to train an animal to cooperate in its own care, we can ask it to shift from one enclosure to another when we need to, just by asking it to. We can give it food that has medication in it and it takes it readily. We can take blood samples, we can do ultrasound exams, we can do x-rays, we can get their weights, we can trim an animal's nails. There's so many things we can do because we teach them to cooperate in their own care. These, for me, are primary reasons for training. They are the reasons I have my job. And I'm passionate about these reasons because it makes life better for those animals that I care for. Now, there are lots of other good reasons to train. But to me, I call them secondary reasons for training. There's a list goes on and on. You train for education, for research, for conservation, for entertainment, for work, for sport. Thousands of reasons. Now, often when I give this list, most of the people I work for, the clients that I have, they shudder at this because they say, wait a minute, these are primary reasons. No. For example, in my facility, we have education programs, research programs, conservation programs, entertainment programs. And those programs might be the primary reason for the existence of the zoo or the aquarium or the guide dog program or whatever. But they're not primary reasons for me to have my job. There's no question that there's lots of really great reasons to train. When I work with canine units in law enforcement, their primary job is work. But my job is to come in and help them give the best care possible to their animals so that they can do their jobs well, so they can have successful long careers as guide dogs, service dogs, working dogs, search and rescue dogs. I don't deny that these things are good reasons for the existence of a specific program. All I'm saying is that as an animal care professional, I need to make sure my priorities are correct. And my number one job is making sure that animals are cared for properly. And as a trainer, I focus on the primary reasons. The organizations I work for can work and focus on these other things. It doesn't mean I don't recognize the importance of these. I need to recognize why an education program is important. I need to understand why people need to be entertained. I need to understand why the work that these animals do is important. All of these are important things. But it's important that you understand how I look at it in that way. So, I want to give you my Reader's Digest version of how to train an animal. Now, for those of you that are trainers in this room, you will look at this quick description, this quick video I'm going to show you and say, well, that's an oversimplification, and it is. But I thought I'd start with this video by saying that I use this as an explanation at our aquarium for the non-trainer. For someone who really doesn't know much about training, but they say, how do you do that? This is my 7 or 8 minute version. Also, I will introduce some of the scientific terminology. I'm not going to go into detail about the science of training this morning, but I will at least introduce some of the terminology to you. I also use this video for our more experienced staff because as an experienced trainer gains in knowledge and skill, sometimes they find it difficult to talk about training to the beginner. And so it helps our experienced staff remember how to keep the concept simple when talking to the general public. So this video is sort of a beginner's guide or a beginner's introduction to training. for us at the aquarium, and it really doesn't matter what species you're working with. What is important is that you understand something about that animal. How does it naturally live in the wild? What is its social structure like? Is it a solitary animal? Is it a group animal? How does it spend its day? What is its time budget like? What are its companion animals like? How does it forage for food? What types of food does it eat? If there's any way to get the lights turned down, I think you'll be able to see these videos a lot better. You don't need to see. Well, actually, during this, there's a lot of videos, so it would be helpful. But besides knowing the species, knowing the individual is important as well. Just because you know about a certain type of animal doesn't mean you're going to know that individual. What is that individual animal's favorite food item? What are its favorite toys? Who are its favorite companion animals? You can learn about that by watching and observing. But one of the most important things is that we build relationships with the animals that we work with. Building the relationship is a key part of training for me. And although I am a scientist at heart, and I can't define science of relationship building, it is critical. But the science that we use when training our animals is referred to as operant conditioning. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of details about operant conditioning today, but you're going to notice that in this particular case, with this particular animal, this is a beluga whale, a female beluga whale, our trainer here is using a whistle. That whistle is designed as a signal telling the animal they've done well. Now, animals don't know that the whistle means good automatically, so you'll see that every time Maris blows the whistle, she follows it with a fish, or she follows it with a tongue tickle, or she follows it with a rub on the head. This is called positive reinforcement. Finding something the animals like and are motivated by to help teach the animals what you want them to do. Now, you're going to notice that as we use the whistle, at the very beginning, we simply always pair it with something the animal likes. Blow a whistle, feed fish. Blow a whistle, clap for the animal. Blow the whistle, rub the animal on the head. It doesn't take an animal very long before they recognize that that whistle is a good thing. They like the sound of the whistle. Now, for reasons that I'm not going to go into today, in our world we call this a bridge, a marker signal, or a bridging stimulus. The reasons for that aren't important. But once the animal understands the sound of the whistle, we then play a little game, which we call targeting, teaching the animal to touch some part of his body to another object. We do that by touching the animal ourselves. Touch the animal on the head, blow the whistle, give a fish. Touch the animal on the head, blow the whistle, rub the animal. Touch the animal on the head, blow the whistle, give another fish. These animals can learn quickly. It doesn't take the whale very long before they go, gee, every time she touches me on the head, I hear the whistle. This head touching game is really easy. I like this game. So, after doing it just a few times, what do you suppose would happen if one day the trainer, instead of touching the whale herself, like that, what if she decided to reach down and hold her hand several inches above the whale's head like this? Well, the whale thinks, wait a minute, you're supposed to touch my hand. Maybe I should come up and touch you. Suddenly the whale realizes, oh, I'm supposed to do the touching. Well, now the trainer can take her hand and move it anywhere. Move it to the right, move it to the left, guide the animal to another location. It doesn't even have to be that trainer's hand. The next thing we can do is use a different trainer's hand. She gives the cue, meaning touch my hand, but now a different trainer in another location puts its hand in the water and the whale touches the hand there. And that's how we might teach the whale to move from one place to another. That's how we might teach them to shift through a gate. These little baby steps that we use when training animals is called successive approximations. It's a scientific term for the baby steps of building a behavior. Targeting doesn't just have to be on the animal's head, though. You can target an animal's back, its side, its belly, its tail, any part of the body you want. For example, when we take blood to assess the health of a beluga whale, we take blood from their tail. So we teach them to target their tail to our hands. That allows us to take a blood sample. Also, you don't have to use your hand. If you want to extend your reach, you can use anything to serve as a target. In this case, she's using a buoy on the end of a stick. That's very helpful to extend your reach, but it can also be helpful if you are working with a potentially dangerous animal that you think might bite you. But either way, the target can help you shape and train thousands of different behaviors. Another way that we train Targeting is just one way. There's hundreds of different techniques. One of the things we do is we watch our animals play. And when an animal plays, they naturally leap, jump, spin, flip, make noises, whatever. When we see them do something we like, we blow that whistle. Well, the animal already knows that the whistle means good. So they heard the whistle, they come rushing over to get a fish. Pretty soon, they're jumping all the time. So then we come up with a hand signal to tell them specifically when we want them to jump. And we can use anything for a signal. It can be a vocal cue, it can be a visual cue. In this case, it's a body signal that we use for a specific reason. When we put a behavior on cue, scientifically it's called an SD, or a discriminative stimulus. But that's just a fancy word for a cue, a signal. Now, just to show you how important these things are, this whole process of shaping behavior this way is often called scanning, or capturing natural behavior. Some people refer to it as free shaping. But let me show you how important the signal and the whistle are for us. In this particular case, this particular trainer, Liz, is going to give a signal asking the dolphin to porpoise, to jump in the air. I want you to watch the hand signal and listen for when she blows the whistle. Hand signal, porpoise please, and listen for the whistle. There's the whistle. Did you notice that she blew the whistle when the dolphin was high in the air? First, she gives the animal nice reinforcement. By blowing the whistle when the animal's high, it tells the animal that the height of the jump is important. If she had waited and blown the whistle when the animal hit the water, that would teach the dolphin that splashing the water is more important. That's how we would teach the dolphin to splash everybody in the front row. This process is called shaping. Now, just to show you how important that whistle is, you saw the single jump a while ago. We're going to do the same thing again, exact same hand signal, but this time she's going to blow the whistle at a different time. Here's the signal, porpoise please. Uh-oh, no whistle. So the dolphin thinks, maybe I better do it again. Oh, still no whistle. Let me do it again. There's the whistle. So the dolphin starts jumping and comes back over and gets a nice rub down, some fish, or whatever. Now I know, if you're new to training, you may say to yourself, how long will that dolphin keep on jumping? Well, the answer depends on the trust and relationship you've developed with the animal. If the animal has learned that you're not going to make it jump forever, you can establish a strong relationship, and animals will gladly participate in this because it's fun for them, it's enjoyable for them, and it's something that you've taught them gradually. So there you have it. 7.5 minutes, everything you need to know about training. Obviously, if it were that simple, all of us would have perfectly behaved pets. We would never have children in trouble. We would never have divorce. Our employees would all work perfectly. The reality is, although the concepts of operant conditioning are simple, there are a lot of factors that impact it. And today, of course, I don't have the time to give you an in-depth lesson about all those different concepts of training, so I'm just going to give you a smattering of important things that I have found that are important. I come from a scientific background, but I also recognize that trust and relationship building are key to successful training. And when you come from a scientific environment, there's always that element that says, well, prove it, quantify it, define it, show me the data. But one of the things that I would suggest is that so much that we have success or failure out of training often happens outside of an official training session. I always try to teach trainers to remember that every interaction we have with an animal has reinforcing value. Most of us, even us, those of us that are professional trainers, we may work with an animal 25 or 30 minutes in a training session. And we may do, let's say we did 10 training sessions with that animal a day. Well, that's a lot, but let's say we did 10. 10 30-minute training sessions is 5 hours of training. Well, very few trainers I know really do 5 hours of training with one animal. But even if you did, there's still, 19 hours in the day? You think your animal's brain gets turned off when you quit purposely training? It doesn't. The animal's learning 24 hours a day. And oftentimes when I work with clients, particularly pet owners or zoological trainers, many of the behavioral problems they are seeing aren't coming from what happens in training sessions. It's from what happens outside of training sessions, when they're not thinking like trainers. I want to show you a quick video here that I put together for pet owners. It's a little silly, but it helps pet owners see how many things they do every day potentially impact
the
training.
Are conscious of the fact that an animal is learning 24 hours a day, not just when we have a clicker and treats. Every interaction that we have with our animals has reinforcing value, either positive or negative. For example, when we choose to roughhouse with our pets, it can seem like fun, but sometimes the dog learns bad habits. As trainers, we must be aware of what our dog is learning at all times. Certainly when there is food involved, such as during meals or while cooking dinner, a dog is very aware of what is going on, and behavior is being shaped whether we intend it to be or not. An awareness of what your animal is doing when you are not there, or not paying attention, is important. Some behavior may be perfectly appropriate, while at other times, the behavior may be undesirable. Unless each trainer is aware of the environment and everything that is in it, we can inadvertently set our animals up to learn bad habits. Often we are busy with our day-to-day lives and just forget that our pets are paying attention to everything that we do. But our animals are also learning when we are not there or not available to observe. Outside distractions and the actions of other people may not be setting you or your pet up for success, and you may not even be aware that it's taking place. These are just a few examples of non-formal interactions, learning that takes place outside of a training session. Early in a trainer's career, we need to become aware of the huge array of outside stimuli that can impact behavior.
And of course, for me, I believe that it's during those non-formal interactions that we really build relationships with our animals. And it's those relationships that we build that have a strong foundation in how receptive an animal might be to training. Which brings me to one of the most interesting topics I will often have with good trainers. Because often when you get into a really good group of trainers who are really successful at what they do, you have a group of trainers that will tell you that the success of their program is all about the relationship and the compassion they have for their animals. And then you have another group of trainers on the other side of the room that will say, no, it's all about the use of good science. And these two groups of trainers will argue with each other over whether it's the compassion and love and relationship that's most important, or whether it's the science and the behavioral theory that's most important. But I got to tell you from experience, you got to have both. For you to be a successful trainer, you have to understand learning theory. You have to understand what motivates and how to shape behavior. But I also believe that to really have buy-in from that animal, you have to have compassion, you have to care about your animal, you have to have trust between you and your animal, and that relationship is important. I don't believe a really true, excellent trainer can do both, cannot have both. They have to have both. Sometimes when I see a trainer that says it's all about loving my animal and that's why they're so well behaved, either they have to be good trainers. They may not know it. I think about my uncle and my grandfather who worked on the ranch. They never went to college. They never went to behavioral school. They could not define any of the operant or classical conditioning terms that are in the scientific textbooks. But they were good at shaping behavior. What that meant is, although they may not have known the science, somewhere along the way they became good practitioners and they were using the science well, even if they couldn't define the terms. You don't have to know definitions to be a good trainer, but you do have to know how to apply the concepts properly. And that can come from experience, but it doesn't come from just being compassionate. But I also believe that you can be a very skilled scientific trainer, and if you don't have the compassion, if you don't have the relationship with your animal, you're not going to go nearly as far. The thing about relationship building is it's hard to define. If relationships were easy, Dr. Phil would be out of a job. The reason we go to our psychologists and these psychiatrists and we go and watch these relationship programs because it's complicated. And it's even more complicated when it comes to relationships with animals. But when you develop trust, it happens over time. I want to show you a video from a colleague of mine that that this is from a program that was put in place with big cats at Marine World Africa USA. It's now called something else, but it's in Vallejo, California, and it's part of the Six Flags organization now. But they have a really unique program in which they work with their big cats. And although this is not what I would recommend for everybody, I want you to see that for even animals that are often thought of as difficult to build relationships with, you can build very strong relationships. So I'm going to let the video speak for itself.
Many of the Marine World Africa USA's 500 animals of land, sea, and air were born at the park. They are hand-raised, receiving individual care and lots of affection, which accounts for the remarkable relationships between the trainers and their animals. Without this extraordinary trainer dedication, Marine World's most compelling attraction, the close interaction between park visitors and the animals, would not be possible.
Yes, you're beautiful.
Beautiful, yeah.
One of the longest lasting animal and trainer relationships is between Naji, a Bengal tiger, and his companion of 15 years, Director of Land Animals, Peter Gross.
Naji here is really a great example of what we do at Marine World. He is the end product of a kind of training that results in our ability to have people get very close to animals. This familiarity with people and this bond starts from the day they're born. The adult tigers actually allow the trainers to sit right there in the box. Even before the tigers have opened their eyes, they're handled and in some cases picked up by the trainers. From that point, they then go to the nursery where the bottle raising and feeding starts. After the cubs have been in the nursery for about 2 to 3 months, they're then taken out amongst the public to sort of grassy play areas. We just turn them loose and let them run, and the public can look at them during their play. And during all this play, they're still with handlers and with people though, the entire time. And then when they get to be about 1 year to 2 years old, like Samson, Jai, and Tara here, they're moved out to what we call Tiger Island, which is a wonderful place for guests in the park to come and see older tigers and play with their handlers. What they're doing right now is the handlers are acting like prey, running away from the tigers, turning their backs on them, and the tigers then, as they would when they made a kill in the wild, run, jump, and knock down, and then roll over in the grass, and in the word they get their stomachs scratched. And the tigers have their own pool. Most people aren't aware of the fact that tigers love the water. This is terrific exercise. We feel it's very important here at Marine World that an animal not just be left to sort of stagnate in closure. It's a very rewarding sort of a job. Sometimes you just sit there and say, God, this is a 500-pound tiger laying there with his head sleeping in the lap. And it's a pretty incredible feeling.
Okay, now, I'll admit that I'm not sure I see the wisdom in acting like prey and running with tigers. But, I have great respect for this program. I worked with big cats for many years. I worked with them in a free contact setting for many years. When I would go and visit my friends there, they would often ask me if I wanted to go in and play with them. I always politely declined. And my friend would always say, but Ken, I don't understand. I see you every day jump in the water with huge killer whales, but you won't come in with my tigers. And I thought about that for a second. I thought, why is that? And then I realized it was because I don't have a relationship with those tigers. And I won't jump in the water with any killer whale. I will jump in the water with killer whales that I know, with killer whales that I trust, with killer whales that I have developed a relationship with. Relationships are strong things. And I don't care if it's hard to quantify it scientifically. I will tell you that I believe it to be an important part of good animal care. Now, I want to talk a little bit today about some of the new trends in training. And depending on your perspective, some of these trends may not seem new, or they may seem revolutionary, depending upon your experience. But one of the things that is very true is that science is a constant. The laws of learning are the laws of learning, and they always work. Whether you're talking about an earthworm or a Harvard graduate, all creatures learn the same way. However, there is no question that the way I would train an earthworm and the way I would train a Harvard graduate are vastly different. The science is the same, it's the application of that science that changes. One of the things that I am a strong proponent of is I am a strong believer in positive reinforcement. I totally get the fact that we can't always have positive reinforcement at our disposal, but I certainly feel that if we can have positive reinforcement as the first tool at our disposal, we will have better motivated animals, we'll have animals that are not afraid to come into a training session, that look forward to a training session. And one of the trends that I've been pleased to see over the years is, as I've been a trainer, is the growth of positive reinforcement in the professional training world, and the recognition that it is a powerful tool, and it is a tool that should be one of the most often used tools. And so that is a trend that I'm really pleased with. Now, I will say that when I look at the dog training world, dog trainers are still very traditional. Traditional training has been around for a long time, and it works. But I am pleased to see that more and more trainers are recognizing that understanding how positive reinforcement works can make a huge difference in the success of a training program and a huge difference in the lives of the animals. Another thing that's really important to me is trainer certification. And there's just a number of organizations that I put on, just a smattering of the ones that I have been involved with or worked with over the years. I work with 2 different dog certification councils for certification of trainers. I have been on a certification committee and headed that committee for the zoological profession for 15 years now. It is I bang my head against a wall on this topic a lot because people are resistant to this concept. But here's why I'm passionate about it. We are all, in whatever profession we are in, are always judged by our lowest common denominator. Without good certification process, anybody can call themselves a trainer. And then, all of us as trainers or animal care professionals are measured by that lowest and worst practitioner in the field. And I recognize that just because you have a certification doesn't make you a great trainer. But at least we all know that that person has started from a similar educational point of view. And to me, it's not about education. It's about practice and knowledge. Just like you have to have a license to drive a car, or a certification to be a teacher, you have to pass the board to be a doctor or a lawyer, that doesn't mean that every driver is an exceptional driver, every teacher is a great teacher, or every doctor or lawyer are great doctors and lawyers. But at least we know that if they have their certification, that they have at least gotten a bare minimum of education and understanding of how to practice their profession or practice that skill. So I'm not here to convince you guys that certification is important, but it's an important part of our profession that is taking on greater meaning. But as that happens, and as more people become involved in the process, there's a lot of conflict as to how to go about a good certification process. That's why there are now 3 or 4 different well-recognized certifications in the dog training world, maybe more, 3 or 4 that I'm aware of. There's probably a lot more than that. The zoo world is really working hard at trying to make this happen because we need to understand what it takes to be a good trainer. One of the things that's been pleasing to me is the zoological advances that we've seen. And I'm going to talk about some of those in just a few minutes. I already mentioned to you earlier how 20 or 30 years ago, the thought of having a training program in a zoo was just ridiculous. Unless they did a show of some kind, they didn't think that training was critical. That's changed today. In the dog training world, I am seeing huge changes in the canine world, in the canine law enforcement world, in the search and rescue world, in the service dog world. And those are hard areas to change because they've been successful in those areas for many, many years. And I'm going to talk about some of those changes as well in just a few minutes. But before I talk about some of those changes, I want to talk about several tools. Actually, I got to ask Patty a question. I know that I've scheduled myself for 2 hours. We took 15 minutes introducing people. Do you want me to cut 15 minutes out, or can I go 15 minutes? I just needed to know so I can cut through some stuff if you want me to finish on time. I want to give you some, I can't possibly talk about every training tool imaginable. You know, I do a graduate course, a semester graduate course on animal training, and it barely scratches the surface, and that's a full semester course. So today, I'm just going to introduce you to a few tools and just give you examples of why they're important tools. All successful training has a basis in science. I said this already. The user may not know it, but if they are having success at training their dog or training their horse or training whatever animal they're training and they're getting the behavior they want, they must be applying the scientific principles properly. They may not know what they're doing from a theoretical point of view, but they know that it works practically. And that's good. I think the practice of training is far more important than the theory. I think if you understand the theory, it can improve your training. But if you only know theory, that doesn't make you a good trainer. You have to be in there hands-on doing it. Skilled practitioners, whether they know the science or not, use hundreds of different tools, hundreds of different concepts to train. And I often find that when a creative trainer uses the science well, it magically moves into this world of art, because there's such an artistic component to good training as well. They work hand in hand. And I believe that any animal can be trained. You know, Bob Bailey always says, every animal can be trained to do anything that it's physically and mentally capable of doing. And that is absolutely true. And I believe that the skilled use of the art, the science, and the relationships of training can really take training to new levels. So when I get to the conclusion in just a little while, I'm going to show you some examples where I think training has been taken to new levels. But let me talk about a few of the tools. In that opening video where I gave you that 7.5-minute Reader's Digest version of how to train, I talked about some of these things, but let me talk about a few of them in more detail. It's critical that if you're going to be a trainer that works with your animal's motivation level, you have to understand what the right reinforcers are. Whether that's food, toys, play, there's lots of things that animals find reinforcing. And they are useful to us in helping to shape behavior. But you have to really understand what the right reinforcers are. You also have to understand what the right reinforcers are from a nutritional point of view if you're using food. Just because an animal loves a food item doesn't necessarily mean it's the most nutritious thing for them, and you have to be aware of how that fits into your program. You also have to decide whether or not you're going to use an event marker or not. I realize that much of the training world has successfully trained animals without a whistle or a clicker or something that marks good behavior. I frequently train without an event marker, without a bridging stimulus, without a signal that says good. But I will tell you that from experience, and science has shown, that if you want precision, or if you want to train from a long distance, having a way to convey to the animal that what they did right there at that exact second was perfect, that's when an event marker, a bridging signal, is perfect. And so in our community, there's lots of different event markers that people use. Some people use clickers. Often with our marine mammals, we use whistles because the whistle sound carries very well underwater, so they work very well for us. But you can use a word like okay or good. Or for many of the animals I work with, we use a tactile marker. If we're working hands-on with the animal, we touch them in a certain way. And that touch is a way of saying what you did right then was perfect. They feel that touch and go, oh, I did good. Or sometimes we use a visual marker. Perhaps you have an animal that's deaf or doesn't hear well. Or like in the case of the picture on the far bottom right, we're working with that animal through a window underwater. They can't hear the whistle. We can't touch them. So we use a visual marker. We point at them. You can be an excellent trainer and not use a marker, but I certainly think it's a tool that trainers should be aware of because it really does help with precision. As I've introduced marker signals into some of the training programs that I've worked with, especially with some of the dog programs I've worked with, they were very resistant to it at first because it seemed difficult. But as we've used it more and more, we are seeing that we can shape behavior faster, with more precision, with more accuracy. So you don't have to use a marker, but it's just a neat tool to be aware of if it works in your situation. There's also two branches of learning theory, operant conditioning and classical conditioning. All animals learn both ways all the time. But you sometimes have to choose which one you're going to focus on. I show a picture of a reptile here because often when I work with reptiles, when I want to train a rattlesnake to come when I call it, when I work with an anaconda, when I work with a Komodo dragon, when I work with a variety of different types of lizards, I really find that knowing classical conditioning works, because classical conditioning works on an instinctive level. And so consequently, by being able to work with automatic reflexive responses that some of these animals have, I can be more successful as a trainer. With certain species of birds, with certain species of fish. If I'm training those animals, I often will use classical conditioning. With a lot of the mammals, operant conditioning is the tool of choice for me. But don't get me wrong, all animals are learning classically as well. But I like using operant conditioning because especially when I'm teaching young trainers, they're working on behavior that they can physically see. A lot of classical conditioning responses are emotional responses or internal responses that are difficult to perceive. I think it's really important that experienced trainers understand and use classical conditioning. And I have no problem teaching young trainers about classical conditioning, but I often find it confuses them. And they can learn more quickly if they learn operant conditioning first. But that is definitely not the scientific perspective, it is my personal perspective. There are some really good dog trainers I know, skilled, excellent dog trainers, who teach classical conditioning to beginning dog trainers first. And they become excellent trainers. Ultimately, it's good to know both. But it's also good to know when going into a training project which branch of the science you're working with. It just helps you be more effective. But it's way beyond the scope of this morning to go into the differences between the two or the details of the two. But most of what I'm going to talk about has to do with operant conditioning. But you do have to think about what the right place to begin. And even though the science is the same, if I'm working with a gorilla, I'm going to approach that very differently than if I'm working with a great horned owl. And that's going to be very different than if I'm working with a dog. I use the same tools, the science is the same, but definitely the breed approach or the species approach is going to be different. I have to have a knowledge of that animal's natural history, its biology, its physiology. I have to know the individual animal. But those are some important tools to get you started. Earlier, in showing you the video of the beluga whale, I talked about targeting as a tool. Targeting is not a really popular tool in many training circles. It's not that it's not popular, it's just they don't use it a lot. In the zoological world, we use targeting all the time. And as I've begun working in other arenas, I kind of tried to bring targeting with me as just a tool. Not the end-all, be-all tool, but it means teaching an animal to touch some part of its body to another object. It can be a very useful tool in building a foundation for countless behaviors. I have found that if you can train an animal to do 7 or 8 basic kinds of targeting, you can shape a brand new behavior down the road in one training session because they have these foundational building blocks that help you. There are hundreds of other ways to approach training. Targeting is just one of those tools. Let me show you a video working with one of my dogs that I put together to help dog trainers see the benefits of targeting.
What follows is a brief introduction to the many types of targeting an animal should learn. A key tool for any trainer is knowing how to use a target. Target can be faded to a simple hand signal or even a more complex body cue. helpful if the animal also understands that he may be asked to target different body parts to something, like this dog's rump to the small rug. A concept like this can be useful in many situations and help guide your dog wherever you want him to be when in different situations or new locations. It is valuable to be able to combine concepts, 2 targets at once, or a different body part, and or extended targeting to create new and useful behaviors. Extended targeting is an important concept that can help facilitate many medical behaviors. Finally, teaching your animal to move from point A to point B and transfer his attention from one trainer or target to another will help with a variety of training tasks. Once a trainer and animal have mastered the use of all the different targeting concepts, new behaviors can be trained more easily and more quickly. Targeting is such an important foundational tool. It's helpful for all trainers to recognize the scope and variety of ways that it can be used.
Again, one of my goals today is really just to introduce you to lots of different tools. Not because you have to use a certain tool, but just so that you're aware that it's available to you. I really have found that a target-trained animal is more versatile. There are frequently lots of things that I would train in which I would not use a target. But I like to build these foundational behaviors because it helps me to train so many different things. I'm going to show you another brief video, but what I want to do is, it's about targeting again. What's interesting to me as a cross-species trainer is that when I'm working with dog trainers and I show them a video about primate training or elephant training, they go, well, how does this apply to me? When I'm working with big cat trainers and I show them videos of a sea lion being trained, they go, I don't see how that applies to me. And so over the years, that video that you just saw, I have it in like 12 versions. You know, I have the tiger version, I have an elephant version, I have a primate version, I have a bird version, I have a dolphin version. It's all the same, but somehow it makes a huge difference. So I'm going to show you just the last couple of minutes of one of the general ones that I use that just shows you targeting.
Here
with
are just a
variety.
few examples of creative or unusual targeting with a variety of species. For some animals, their natural instinct is to grab a target with their hand rather than sniff it or touch it with their head. A chopstick was used as a target for this marmoset. Allowing the animal to touch or grab the target with his hand was the first basic step used, which is a common form of targeting for many primates. Sitting on a perch is usually the first basic target taught to most birds. Flying a bird from point A to point B requires gradual desensitization to different targets and to changing surroundings. In this particular setting, the length of the A to B targeting and the desensitization required makes this a very advanced targeting concept. The training of sled dogs is a complex task. One of the techniques used is to allow young dogs to follow an experienced dog team. Because the young dogs do not want to be left behind and seem eager to participate in the task, the experienced dogs serve as a target for the younger dogs to follow. Once the dogs are comfortable following each other, the trainer can integrate them into the team more quickly. The use of another animal as a target is a great example of creative targeting. In a zoological setting, targeting can be used for guiding animals into positions for getting weights. This is even possible in a protected contact situation with animals as dangerous and large as a polar bear. Protected contact training uses targeting in many forms to maneuver animals to appropriate locations. The presentation of various body parts through openings or doors can be accomplished through the use of basic targeting. This provides excellent access to an otherwise challenging animal. In some cases, a target may be something the animal can see but not touch. As in this case, using a laser pointer to guide a siamang to the far wall. Just because an animal is large or potentially dangerous does not mean it cannot be trained. Quite the contrary. A good understanding of targeting can be the starting point for making training so much easier for almost any animal. There is no doubt that targeting is a critical tool that can be used for many types of behaviors, from simple to complex. To review, the 8 targeting concepts are basic targeting, varied types of targets, complex targeting, extended targeting, follow targeting, targeting of various body parts, multiple simultaneous targets, and A to Bs. It is important that young trainers never take targeting for granted and take the time to establish all aspects of this very important tool.
Okay. So, one of the things that I think is important, again, I don't want to overemphasize targeting, it's just a tool that I like to teach about because some people don't use it. I want to give you another example, though, of it's not just species. When I work with law enforcement, that little white spaniel that you saw, can't use it for them. They see that little dog, they go, we don't work with dogs like that. So I have to use my bulldog or my Rottweiler. Then they go, oh, it works with big dogs too. It really, sometimes just to visually get people to see how something can work, you have to work with them on a level that they can connect with. And so frequently I find that I really try to help trainers understand that training is training. If you understand the techniques, they can be applied to all sizes of animals, to all breeds of animals, in many different situations. Third kind of concept I want to talk about is the idea of going through a door, going through a gate, going into a kennel. This is a universal need. There's a huge need for this concept in pet community, in the zoological community, yet it's often overlooked or taken for granted, especially the pet training world, because it's so easy to just pick up your dog and put them in a kennel, that a lot of times people don't take the time to train and make going into a kennel a positive experience. Those of you who put your dogs into a kennel every day and they have no problem with it probably don't even know what I'm talking about. But I'm surprised as I travel in the zoological community, there are animals that just will not go into a small squeeze cage or a restraint chute, or that won't shift from one enclosure to another. There are dog trainers I know who just cannot get their dogs to go into a kennel and make it a positive place. It needs to be approached positively. And my experience has been, it really is a behavior that's not difficult to train. I'm just going to show you some video that has a couple of different examples of kenneling. And this is that little white dog of mine again. She's a spaniel mix. She's a shelter dog. And this dog has no trouble going into a kennel, but I use this as an example for people who have difficulty getting their dog into a kennel, showing them how you can approximate the process so that it's not a scary, closed-in, dark place. One of the secrets I find for animals that are afraid of going into a kennel or a closed cage of some kind is often they're afraid of being trapped in there. And so what I often do is I'll train it without a door, or even if there is a door, I either don't close the door or I don't lock it, so that they push on it, they learn that they can get out. As soon as they realize they have the ability to come and go whenever you want, their comfort level is greater. Then you can later teach them that you're going to close the door sometimes for longer and longer periods of time. This was an owl that was a rehabbed owl that was terrified of people. But over time, he became very comfortable, but he was very afraid of the dark kennel. By using a couple of well-placed mice, that's what we just did right there, threw a mouse into the back of the kennel. He looks at it, and this was his very first time going in. He thinks about it, he jumps in, he eats it, but we don't close the door the first time he goes in. We didn't close the door for almost 2 months. Now he loves the kennel. It's hard to get him out of the kennel. It's a whole different situation with him now. With our sea otters are very destructive animals. They destroy their habitat all the time. So we constantly have to move them. By training them to go into a kennel, it makes it easy for us to just say, could you kennel please? And we can carry them to another habitat, to another location, anytime we want to. Sometimes you can do such a good job of training the kennel, though, that the kennel becomes so positive the animals don't want to leave their kennel. That's what happened with the panda that I was working with. This panda, we were working on an artificial insemination project inside this kennel. Well, I don't know if it was the treats we used or the fact that it was artificial insemination, but nonetheless, he loved being in his kennel. He loved it so much that we had to use our best reinforcers, bamboo, to get him to leave the kennel. But either way, I was pleased that we were able to make going into the kennel a positive experience. We had to work extra hard to make leaving the kennel a positive experience, but we were successful at it. But again, it's about choosing the right reinforcers, taking your time, having a relationship with the animal, building up that trust, and never betraying that trust. I have no problem putting an animal into a kennel for hours and hours and hours, but you've got to build up to it. You don't go from trapping them in there one time and it makes them fearful of that space. Most of you probably are very aware of that, but it is something I work with a lot of clients that I work with. The last tool I want to talk about before I go into some of the more modern applications is tactile. Touching an animal allows you to do many things. And medical behaviors especially are important. If you're going to take your dog to the vet and they need to have their ears checked, and their eyes looked at, their nails trimmed, but with zoological animals as well, if we want to trim their hooves, if we want to trim their feathers, if we want to look at their eyes, listen to their heart rate, it requires touch. And being able to touch an animal takes time. There's a lot of techniques to building up that trust. There's a process and a tool in the scientific world called desensitization. It's a fancy word for getting animals used to new stuff. Exposing them to things gradually so that they're comfortable with it. Teaching them that this scary thing isn't so scary after all. This scary metal clipper thing that you use to clip their nails is something that can be a positive thing. But it takes time. It's an ongoing process that never ends. The mistake a lot of trainers make is they assume, well, I taught the animal this, it's all learned. But if it's a scary process, an uncomfortable process, desensitization has to go on and on and on and on their entire lives so that you can maintain their comfort level and maintain their trust. Also, it's important to keep in mind that not every animal wants to be touched, but if trained with care, it's possible. I do a lot of work with birds of prey. Unlike cockatoos and macaws are social animals, and they preen each other. And because they preen each other, they are much more readily accepting of the trainer preening them, touching them, holding them. It still has to be taught. But bald eagles, great horned owls, red-tailed hawks, they're self-preeners. They do not allow other birds to touch them. They certainly don't want you to touch them. But you can teach them to allow touch, and they can actually like it. But you have to do that process slowly. I also think you have to determine when and where to use tactile. If you have an orphaned offspring who doesn't have a mother, then you're going to serve in the role of the surrogate mother, and then touching that animal is going to be critical in helping it to develop. Other animals, perhaps touching doesn't make sense. Or if you're working with an exotic animal that has never been in human care before, and it's quite wild and not tame and not used to training, well then, it's not that you can't touch the animal, but you approach touching the animal very differently. You have to understand who you're working with. I also think you have to ask yourself, is training always the answer? I am a strong proponent of training. I think training is always helpful in every situation. However, you have to use some common sense and reason. There are some hoof stock, for example, that I work with in zoological settings where you may have a herd of 70 or 80 animals. And the veterinarian in that organization wants to get a blood sample and a physical exam on those animals every 2 years. And those animals are very flighty animals, and it may take you months and months and months or years to get them built up to the point where you can voluntarily take a blood sample. Then you take that first blood sample and it sets the whole behavior back. You have to work at it for 2 years again. Ultimately, you may find that the stress of anesthetizing that animal for an exam is far less than the stress of training it. Or what you might do is you might do simple training, like training it to come into a small enclosure where it's easier to get access to anesthetize the animal, but you may not train it for difficult blood sampling if you don't need it. You kind of have to assess the cost-benefit analysis of what the time it's going to take for you to train it, the challenge it's going to be for that particular animal, and how important it's going to be for their long-term care. I believe every animal should be trained, but I don't necessarily believe that every animal should be trained to do everything. I think it depends on your time, your resources, and the animal's needs, and you have to assess it. But tactile is a really important thing. And I'm going to again show you a brief video showing you some of the different successes we've had with tactile on. I think I'm going to show you 3 or 4 species here. This first one, this is a barred owl because of the bars on its chest. This is an animal that was rehabbed, and because it was rehabbed, it was very sick, and it had to be caught by the veterinary staff every day. So much so that it was terrified of people when we brought it to our facility. But she's not terrified anymore. This is a bird that likes the tactile. She allows us to touch her, preen her, clip her nails, feel her crop to look at her weight, put her on a scale, put eye drops in. Now that didn't happen overnight. When we got this animal, she would go to the back of the enclosure, hiss at us, and didn't want any person to come near her. 2 years later, we have an animal that allows us to touch her, manipulate her, various parts of her body. She'll fly for us when we need to from point A to point B. We're opening up the feathers to look at her ears. Again, it was something we were able to accomplish because of good training, patience, and relationship building. The otters that we had raised, these are all rescued otters from the Exxon Valdez oil spill. We raised them as pups, so they loved us. Touching them wasn't hard. What was hard is they wanted to hug us and grab us and bite us. So what we did is we used our training tools. The target became essential. Whenever we needed to touch them, they have to hold on to the target while we touch them. They can't grab us if they're holding on to something else. So we used that training technique so they had something to grab onto when the veterinarian wants to touch them. When we work with them on land, we have them target their nose and their paws to the wall, like this. Because by doing that, they cannot bite us or grab us and put their hands on the wall at the same time. So because we know they like to touch us, we gave them something else to do that was heavily reinforced, helping us to make touching safer. This next animal is a tapir. This is at the Melbourne Zoo in Australia. I go there several times a year, and going there this Thanksgiving to work with them again. This was a tapir who had a terrible incident that startled the animal while we were doing medical exam. Became terrified of people. But with a lot of patience and work, watch this animal. This animal now not only accepts tactile, it is the only reinforcer we are using. We're actually using it as a reinforcer. Watch this animal go to sleep before your very eyes, and we'll do things like right now Rich, who's the trainer there, is going to give this animal eye drops. This animal doesn't like the eye drops, but allows it to be done so that Rich will pet. We now can do ultrasound, hoof trims, we can take blood, we do eye drops, ear ointment. All of this is possible, and the animal will do it for the sake of a good rub down. And this is an animal that was afraid of people several years prior. But with some good desensitization, good use of positive reinforcement, relationship building, this animal just says, give me a massage all day long, I'll do anything you want for a nice massage. And just to show you, this is an animal who's afraid of people. In just a few minutes, you're not going to hear it on the video because I don't have sound on the video other than the music playing. There's going to be a truck that backfires off outside the yard, off in the distance. It's going to startle the animal, and he's going to jump up and back away. Rich, who's doing the session, was running out of time, and he needed to end the session. So because the animal left him, he decides to end the session and leave. And I want you to see the animal's reaction to Rich leaving. So here's the startle sound that he hears. He gets up, he's looking toward the sound, and because he looks like he's going to run away, Rich decides, okay, that's fine, you're finished, I'm going to end the session. Here's an animal that used to run away from people. But now it's running, it's saying, wait, Rich, don't leave. Wait, I'm sorry, I'll come back and pet me. Well, he's not saying that. That's what I'm believing he's thinking. Sorry, I get a little anthropomorphic sometimes, I realize. But I really believe you're seeing a huge turnaround. We used to enter this animal's enclosure and he would go the other way. Didn't want to have anything to do with us. Today, he comes to us. He wants to do things with us, and we just give him a nice massage, and that's the reinforcer we use for all these behaviors. There are so many modern applications that I could share with you. I don't have a lot more time, but I want to talk about some cool directions that I've seen us go. Use of training is expanding into lots of new areas. And one of the things that excites me is I see traditional trainers and programs looking to expand their tool set. And that encourages me, because I think any trainer in any profession, as soon as we begin to say, I've learned it all, I know it all, well, that's when we begin to fail. Because there's no way any of us, I don't care if you have 20 years experience or 50 years experience, you can never experience everything. You can never see every training technique or work with every possible animal. And the more open we are to learning from each other, learning about the different techniques that are out there, the better off our animals will be. Because I do believe that by using training tools properly and understanding the full tool set that's available to us, it's the animals that benefit. It's why I love being a trainer, because I believe it directly benefits those animals. Let me show you just a few examples. Working dogs. I got my start as a trainer by volunteering. I don't even count the fact that I grew up on a ranch, although that's significant to me. It's where my family's from. It's where I go to when I need to take a break. But my passion about training happened when I worked with guide dogs. And I saw, how cool is this to play with dogs all day but train them for a really good purpose? And that's what I thought I was going to do. I love the fact that for the last 14 years, 13 years, I've been working with working dogs in a number of situations. The challenge is that many of the organizations that do training, they've been around for a long time. And it's hard for any of us to open our doors and invite in new tools and new ideas, especially when you're talking about organizations that have been very successful. When an organization's been successful, why change? It's always scary because you're not sure that you'll be as successful afterwards. But canine units have found far greater success with positive reinforcement techniques. I have been working with search and rescue dogs for the last 14 years. I'm very proud to say the dogs that I have worked with have been in some pretty key situations. 2 of my dogs were in the 9/11 search site. I've had dogs that have gone off to some really challenging search and rescue locations. And the thing about, here's what I got to say about whether you're talking about search and rescue, or you're talking about narcotic dogs, or explosive detection dogs, we all know dogs love to use their nose. You do not have to force them to use their nose. They like it. It's reinforcing in and of itself. So consequently, by bringing more positive reinforcement techniques into the workplace, we are seeing far less false alerts, we're seeing far less problems, and many, many different organizations are beginning to look at that as an additional tool. I'm not suggesting they're transitioning completely away from the traditional techniques that have been so successful for them, and I don't blame them. But the fact that many of them are looking at some new positive reinforcement techniques that they didn't use before, and they're seeing greater success, is exciting. Service dog programs are also making this transition, but it's a hard one. I started my career, as I said, as a volunteer working with guide dogs. And a lot of the techniques that they use with guide dogs where I worked when I was in high school, it was a long time ago, were not techniques that I would normally employ today. But they produced reliable guide dogs. Very reliable. And it's hard for those organizations to change. I have been working with 2 different guide dog organizations over the years, most recently with Guide Dogs for the Blind. They have a facility in Oregon, in Boring, Oregon, and another one in San Rafael, California. And I'm going to show you a video clip from one of their programs. And this is just showing emergency response reaction for a dog. It's not focusing on the positive reinforcement aspects. But Michelle Pulio, who is the narrator of this video, is also a real leader in really utilizing these techniques for her program. And Guide Dogs for the Blind has done some really remarkable work at transitioning to using positive reinforcement with their dogs. this is difficult work, and there are things that we train these dogs to do that is really remarkable. And I think that what I've been pleased with is as I have been exposed to this world again, you know, got back into it 15, 20 years after I first was exposed to it, I see the growth, I see a variety of communities that are looking for new techniques, looking for ways to improve their programs, and I'm really impressed by that. I'm impressed by the forward-thinking nature of many of these programs and how they're going forward. And again, they're utilizing good science, good training to accomplish some very important tasks that I think most of us should be proud of what these animals are able to accomplish. I'd like to share with you something that's been new for me in the last 4 or 5 years, and that is, as somebody who works in zoological organizations, I feel it's important to pay back to wildlife in their natural habitats. And sometimes you would think that being a trainer would not apply to conservation work, but it does. I'm actually putting together a full-length seminar for University of North Texas next February on just this topic, on using training to help in wildlife conservation. I think as we become better at using training techniques and better at understanding the science, the applications of wildlife rehabilitation are amazing. As many of you are probably aware, the California condor is an endangered species. Zoos began raising condors and then releasing them. Problem was that after they began releasing these condors, those condors were all imprinted on people. So they didn't go off and be like normal condors, they wanted to hang around where people were. So they brought together a group of very creative trainers, led by Steve Martin, the bird trainer, and several other very skilled individuals who used their understanding of operant and classical conditioning to put together a training program that has now led to the successful release of many, many condors. And they are no longer imprinted on people. But without skilled trainers, that part of the process might not have been possible. Dr. Randy Wells is in his 37th year doing social structure studies of bottlenose dolphins off the coast of Sarasota, Florida. Part of what helped him to do that was to bring several of those animals into a zoological setting and study them for 2 or 3 years and then release them again. But to take an animal from the wild, bring it into a zoological setting, and then take it back into the wild can be challenging unless you have skilled trainers. Michelle Jeffries was the trainer that was hired to put together a program to make sure that the acclimation into the zoo world and then the acclimation back out into the wild was done successfully. And we know more about this particular species of dolphin than any other. And Dr. Wells' 37-year project is groundbreaking in its ability to understand this particular population of animals. But that particular study could not have been accomplished without skilled behaviorists and trainers making sure that those animals could adapt successfully both into the zoological world and then back out into the wild. I am currently working at a situation at the Bonneville Dam, which is, for those of you who don't know where the Bonneville Dam is, it's on the Columbia River, which is the river that separates Washington State from Oregon State. Well, when they built this dam in the 1970s, they had the foresight to put a fish ladder on the dam so that Chinook salmon could go upstream to spawn. Chinook salmon are an endangered species of salmon. And despite the fact that this dam is over 125 miles from the ocean, California sea lions figured out that if they swam up that river 125 miles, that stair that's designed for the fish is a perfect place for them to sit and wait and let Chinook salmon just jump into their mouth. And they are decimating the salmon population. Well, because of the Endangered Species Act, the U.S. government is required to take action. And so they got permission to take 70 animals from the Bonneville Dam each year and euthanize them. Many zoos and aquariums have stepped forward and have made homes for these animals. We have several of the animals in our facility. But more important than that, the National Marine Fisheries Service and the Department of Fish and Wildlife in both Oregon and Washington recognized that this was a behavioral problem. And they convened a panel of animal training experts to work with them, and we're in the process of working on a behavioral plan to retrain the sea lions to find good fish, but that's not endangered somewhere else. But it's working with animals in the wild, using the knowledge that we have of behavior management to be able to change behavior and protect wildlife. I'm also involved in a particular project in Alaska where polar bears have become a serious problem cohabitating with people. This is the easiest, believe it or not, this is one of the easiest projects because so many of the polar bear problems are because of things that people are doing that make it very reinforcing to dig into their garbage or eat their sled dog or do other things like that. And by changing some of the people's behavior, and believe me, a big polar bear causing a threat to your safety is a great motivator for people to actually follow certain guidelines. We're able to make some significant difference, but we're using behavioral models and training to help change the polar bear's behavior and to change the human's behavior. One of the most recent examples that I'm so proud of is been going on right now with the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Let me give you some background, and then I'll tell you where training had an impact. Maybe you've seen this in the news, but if not, I want to tell you this story. There are thousands of species of animals being decimated by this oil spill. And despite the fact that we're not hearing about the oil spill anymore because the Deepwater Horizon has been tapped, the oil is still there. And there are still lots of animals being affected. Unfortunately, most of the animals affected are fish and species that live below the surface of the water, so most of us will never see them. But sea turtles are visible, and they are one of the most impacted. In fact, in 1979, an oil spill very similar to this one occurred off the coast of Mexico, and it is what put several species of sea turtles on the endangered species list. Every species of sea turtle throughout the world is now endangered. There are so few of them left. So the real dilemma happened is that, and of course this oil spill occurred when? In the beginning of the summer. And guess when sea turtles lay their eggs and hatch? In the summer. So the real concern was that the hatchlings were supposed to come out in August. And they were going to make their way out to sea. And wildlife biologists estimated that there should be 50 to 60,000 eggs that were going to hatch in the risk region. Meaning that these sea turtles instinctively come out of their eggs, come out and go right out to sea, and they would have gone right into the oiled area. Well, this just couldn't happen. These were endangered species. An entire generation was about to be wiped out simply because the turtles would swim right into the oil spill area. So, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is the government agency responsible for this particular species of animals management, they decided to relocate eggs to the East Coast. To take the eggs, hatch them, and release them off the coast of Florida, the East Coast of Florida, where there would be no oil. They went, because we know where the nests generally are, they went and they found 12,000 eggs and relocated them. But they were disappointed because they felt there were probably 40,000 eggs, 35 to 45,000 eggs that were still missing. They couldn't find them. I was on a team that was, our staff has been going down to the Audubon Institute in New Orleans and helping in sea turtle rehabilitation. So I was on this team as they were talking about this frustration. I said, well, we can find the eggs quickly. And they said, how? I said, well, we can use detection dogs, train them to find sea turtle eggs, and they'll find them. And they said, that's never been done. I said, well, no, it has. 7 years ago, I worked on a conservation project with Disney in Florida, Disney's Animal Kingdom. They were doing a census count, and we trained 3 dogs very quickly who were scent detection dogs already, trained them on sea turtle egg scent, and they were able to find the eggs. I said, I can get those dogs and give me a week, and I think I can get a couple of really good scent detection dogs and get them finding sea turtle eggs. I got several of my colleagues, we put together a program, we trained 8 dogs, and those dogs did a great job, and those dogs found 29,000 additional eggs. And again, how? We had some dog trainers who were able to do some good training, and they helped find sea turtle eggs, which we were then able to relocate. There's a lot of creative ways we can use our skills as trainers to help in fascinating ways that people might not have thought of before. In the zoological world, the advances have been amazing. Zoos have gradually recognized the advantages of training in providing better animal care. But you've got to understand the pain in getting here. I have been involved in the zoological community for 35 years now. When I got started, there was no zoo had a director or curator of training or behavior unless they had a dolphin training program, an elephant training program, or a bird training program. Because those animals often did shows of some kind. But even in those facilities, those directors of training were only responsible for training those animals that performed in shows. The rest of the zoo world said, oh no, training, we don't do that. That's not natural. It took a long time for a number of individuals, and I've been one of those that gets out and preaches the gospel of training to people to try to convince them that this is good for the animals. Well, 20 years ago, we finally started to see a trend. San Diego Zoo was one of the first. New York Zoological Society, a number of zoos began to hire trainers, people with skills in animal behavior management, to look and design training programs for the entire zoo. Not just for the performing animals, but for the well-being of all of them. Today, I can't even count the number of individuals that zoos that have these kinds of programs. We're still not where I think we should be, but it's a huge change in zoos recognizing that training is a good component to good animal care. Our USDA inspectors now come into our facilities and recognize that training is important. The government is now recognizing that it's important. I want to show you a video. This is one of the longer videos I'm going to show you today. Hopefully my computer will keep up with this. But it will give you a chance to see just a smattering of examples of the kind of training happening in zoos all over the United States. Many of these are zoos that I have been working with. I'm going to turn the volume down a little bit to talk about it. Sometimes it's very what I call passive or informal training, where we simply expose the animals to kennels or cages. Here's a warthog being trained to target, just to guide it. This is a warthog that wasn't particularly safe to be in the enclosure with, so this particular animal's worked within a protected contact setting. Here's another target, simply being used to build a relationship with the trainer and keeper, to get the animals to move and follow the trainer where we needed them to be so that we could get them into a kennel. This is a tree kangaroo. At the Brookfield Zoo, we worked with the tree kangaroos because we needed it to be able to take a scope and look into its pouch to look at its joey as it was coming up. Here's a river otter being trained to shift and go from one enclosure to another. Here's our dolphins at the aquarium. This is just a fun mental exercise, having them come to shapes and look at doing behaviors underwater and giving us the chance to bring guests and children right up close to an animal. Training can be so helpful, as I said before, in being able to provide mental stimulation and physical exercise. Here was a camel that was particularly aggressive. This zoo felt we can't put together an expensive protected contact system. We didn't need to. We just took some links out of the chain link and are able to work with this camel in this particular setting. Here's an elephant that needed we needed to do TB tests on our elephant population. And so we trained them. They come over, they give us their trunk, we put the solution in their trunk and collect it, and we do that on a regular basis for their annual TB test. Okapis are amazingly tactile animals. With some animals, we get in the water or get in their enclosure and play with them and build. This is a calf, a baby that was born in our facility, and she thinks so. She does everything with us, and because of that relationship, we're able to train so many different behaviors. Here's a red-tailed hawk in our program, again being touched, tactile to clip its nails, tactile to feel its keel. Here's a shark, training the sharks to shift. We train our sharks for ultrasound. We train our sharks for a variety of things. This is a fish. A lot of people think, oh, you can't train it, but of course you can. You can train anything. Here's a tiger. This is a really example of a really motivated keeper. Here at the zoo, in this particular facility that I was consulting with, they didn't have a lot of manpower. They didn't have a lot of people. But this guy was determined to do blood taking on his tigers. was going to get blood from the tail, and even though he had nobody helping him, he was able to work patiently, get the tiger to target, come into the smaller enclosure, give him his tail, and he gets blood now regularly from the tigers. Because of his motivation to show what he could do with a little bit of initiative, his managers and his supervisors are now giving him more resources. He's able to do a lot more because he demonstrated that he had the skill and the initiative to use good training for very good purposes. Here's a rhino. In this particular case, this particular veterinarian preferred to take blood from the foot, from the leg. Oftentimes we take blood from a rhino's ear, but there's a lot of places where you can take blood from. So you can see the keeper, the trainer is at the front, reinforcing the rhino, keeping the rhino's interest, while the veterinarian is down below, taking a blood sample. Again, all possible because we build relationships and we train the animals to participate in their own care. And once zoos began to see that training was a lot more than just performing, that it really was about good animal care, we were able to do so much more. This is one of our beluga whales. This is a 2,000-pound beluga whale. Now this trainer, Maggie, she's very strong, but I gotta tell you, she cannot hold a 2,000-pound animal and keep it there if it doesn't want to stay. This is a porcupine at the San Diego Zoo. This is just an example of using a collar, a harness like you would with a dog, and to make a program animal, an educational program. They walk the porcupine out of the zoo all the time for visitors to see. It helps dispel myths about the porcupine, but they could not do this if they didn't use good, practical training. To make these experiences fun, to make these experiences easy. You can force a penguin to get on a scale, but why not teach it to hop on the scale? Then it's more fun. Primates. Frequently, primates, there's all sorts of things that are really important. Training is such a key thing for their health, such a key thing for their mental stimulation and physical exercise. Here you can see we're doing a variety of medical exams with this animal. Having it present its arm, having it present its leg. You might see the trainer has a clicker in his hand to mark the behavior. We may get 2 or 3 behaviors from an animal and then reinforce it. But the animals are very cooperative in the process, and it certainly helps immensely in their care. This is a large male orangutan. We're going to get its temperature using an ear thermometer in the ear. We give it the cue to turn its head, and then we're able to get its temperature. This is not where it lives. This is just in its enclosure in the back where it gives us quick and easy access to the animal. Here's the same enclosure with the female. I want you to show that one of the things, because orangutans are so eager to hold on to things with their hands, in this case we teach the animal that while we're doing medical exams, their hands have to be holding on to the bars above. That way, while we're reaching in and touching other parts of their body, their hands have something to do. Again, using the training techniques to help us make the procedure safe, especially when you're doing medical behaviors that can be uncomfortable sometimes. It can be scary for an animal. You want to give them something to focus on. When we ask her in a second, now we're going to listen use a stethoscope to listen to her heart. In a minute, we're going to ask her to turn around. She lets go and then immediately repositions her hands and holds on again. That way, the hands have something to do before we reach in and start touching her. She can't grab us. Service dogs, I've talked about them already today. But again, the use of these tools are being used in training all over. Here we are at the San Diego Wild Animal Park. Honk the horn, the giraffes all come to the back of the trailer, and then when we get there, the trainer and the vet tech there can do a procedure. They're going to actually do some ear treatment on this particular giraffe. But they're able to do that because the giraffes find coming over to the keepers very reinforcing. It's a positive experience, which then allows us to do much better care with the animal. A camel, this camel broke his jaw, so we trained it to lie on a plate for an x-ray. Teaching an animal to open its mouth so you can brush its teeth, look at its gums, look at its tongue, assess its health from that perspective. Even animals that have sharp teeth, if you train them right, you can teach them to allow you to pull the gums back so you can look at the teeth. You can teach them to allow a toothbrush. The hardest thing about brushing an animal's teeth is often getting them used to the dental solution that you're using because they don't often like the taste. Having this chimp open its mouth so we can look at its teeth. The point I'm making, that's the end of that particular video, the point I'm making is there's a lot of things that you can do as a trainer. And the zoological world is just opened up. This is new for the zoo world. Exotic animal trainers have been doing these kinds of things for years. But the reality is, all it takes is a little imagination and understanding of the science, and the possibilities are limitless. I believe that good training elevates an animal care program to a new level of professionalism. I think it's important that trainers understand the science. It's critical. The reality is you can be a good trainer without understanding the science, but you do have to understand how to apply techniques properly. I think when a trainer has artistic vision, when they use creativity, when they look at relationship building, I think that has to be part of the equation because it really makes training all that much better for the animals. Again, I'll say it again, I believe that training is ultimately about better animal care. And I say this all the time. Training should not be looked at as a luxury. It shouldn't be something you do if you got the time, if you got the staff, if you've got the interest. It is a critical component to any good animal care program. When you do that kind of training, it can lead to marvelous successes. Many facilities that have good training programs are able to see, this is a beluga calf being born. We have a very successful breeding program at the Shed Aquarium. We've had a large number of belugas born in our program. But it's possible because we build relationships with the animals. We're able to get a window into their world that wouldn't be possible if we didn't care for them in a controlled setting. We're able to learn things about these animals we couldn't learn any other way. We learn things that we can then apply to their study in the wild, to their conservation in the wild. But if we didn't have facilities to house these animals, if we didn't have dedicated animal care professionals caring for them under human care, if we didn't have trainers, then we wouldn't be able to see this kind of success. We wouldn't be able to give back to the wild the way that we're able to do today, and the way that I think we'll be able to do even better in the future. Does training matter? Of course it does. I think it is critical to good animal care. And I don't care whether you're training animals as performers, as working animals, as pets, in zoo care, or wildlife rehabilitation. The reality is training is essential. I know that I've only scratched the surface. I know that for many of you, I probably am preaching to the choir. But I wanted you to see that there's a whole array of possibilities out there. Most of you I don't know. I've not met most of you before. Here's my email address and my website. I am good about answering emails. I will answer any questions you have. If you have questions, I'm around the rest of the day today, but I'm willing to take questions and answer questions if you have any. And I think I was still able to get us in on time so that we can take our break. Thank you very much for having me here today.